Thanks and welcome everyone. I'm so excited to speak to such a huge group from all over the country, and I'm excited to see some of the questions that have started to come in. My name is Erica Smith Fichman. I am the Community Forestry Manager at Philadelphia Parks and Recreation, which is our city agency. We are responsible for care and the planting and care of all of the public trees in the city of Philadelphia. So that's the trees on over 10,000 acres of parkland and all of the street trees. We have 115,000 street trees in the city. So Parks and Rec is taking the lead on the city's strategic plan for the planting and care of our urban forest, which is called the Philly Tree Plan. It's currently at the very end of the planning period. But over the course of 2021, we did a very extensive community engagement effort, and that is what I'm going to be focusing on today. But we do have a community engagement hub where you can see a lot of the materials that I am going to be referencing, and you can see a draft, kind of a draft outline of what the plan will tackle based on what we heard. So let's go into the next slide. So the Philly Tree Plan, as I said, is the city's strategic plan for its urban forest. It's a 10-year plan for the equitable growth and care of our urban forest. And throughout this process, we've been guided by three main values. This is the mission statement that we put together when we first organized our project team, a team full of other city agencies, nonprofit organizations, state and federal agencies, including our amazing Forest Service colleagues in the Philadelphia Field Station. And so our mission from the beginning has been to guide this process with an eye towards environmental justice, community engagement, and sustainability. And we chose to emphasize environmental justice in our mission because we know that a huge part of the work of creating the plan is listening to people. And we know as urban foresters that trees can be both a source of joy and a source of stress for our residents, because healthy, well cared for trees are crucial for the mental and physical health of residents, but trees can also cause problems. So the goal of this plan is to bring the benefits of trees to communities that need them the most in the ways that support them the best. And the scope of the plan is the entirety of the urban forest. So all of the public space trees that I mentioned, street trees, park trees, recreation centers, playgrounds, but also all of our natural areas. We have over 5,000 acres of natural areas in the city. So that includes forests, but also meadows, riparian, wetlands. And it also includes residential trees, institution trees, campuses, alleyways, vacant lots, and more. You can see from this map that the tree canopy is not evenly distributed across the city. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. This is a generalized map of what our tree canopy looks like in the city as of a 2019 study from the Forest Service and the University of Vermont Spatial Analysis Lab. So we did our first LiDAR study of our tree canopy in 2011, where we found that residential yards had the greatest capacity for more trees. So we started to engage the public at that point. And then we wanted to do another study. So in 2019, we did one where we looked at not only what our current canopy is, which you can see from the slide is 20% on average across the city, but also where we've lost and gained tree canopy. So if we go to the next slide, you can see that we have actually lost 6% of our tree canopy over the past 10 years, and that represents 100 football fields worth of tree canopy. So a lot of that, the land use that lost the most canopy was residential land, but we also lost a significant amount on our public lands, including our right-of-ways, our street trees. And you can also see that where the tree canopy exists is not equitably distributed. Also, we lost tree canopy in an inequitable way as well. So there's a lot of dynamics happening here. So just a little bit about Philadelphia and some of the trends that we see here in our city that many other cities see. So as you can see from these maps, there are fewer trees where there's more poverty in the city. And Philadelphia is the poorest of the large US cities. We have 23% of our residents living in poverty. So it is a huge problem here in the city. On the next slide, you can also see that there are fewer trees where, go back. There we go. Where there are fewer trees where there are more Black and brown people. The city of Philadelphia is a majority minority city. We have over 42% Black or African American. We have over 40% white and about 7% Asian. And so this represents a massive problem as well. And it sets the stage a little bit for the goal of the plan to grow a fair forest where we're bringing the benefits of trees to the communities that need them the most in ways that support them the best. And we did a lot to figure out where are those communities that need trees the most. So how did we get input from the communities that need trees the most? And how, what tools did we use? I'm going to go through quite a few of those. So the very first thing we did before we even chose our contractor, our consultant, excuse me, to create the plan was we created a community voices steering committee. There are about 30 people on this steering committee. They are active residents and community leaders from across the city. They meet regularly with us to advise, provide guidance and oversight on the plan, and they helped us develop every aspect of the community engagement process. So the plan to do community engagement was vetted through them. Many of the tools that we used, we sent the materials to them to take a look at them. And the next slide, we engaged them in a prioritization, looking at what areas in the city should be prioritized in terms of environmental justice for increased investment in tree planting and care. So we looked at public health factors like asthma, cancer rates, mental health. We looked at poverty, income, like I said. We looked at heat. We used heat island data as well. Of course, we used tree canopy data, and we developed this map on the right, which shows the areas of the city that are the highest priority for increased investment. And this map has been extremely important, not only in guiding our public engagement process to make sure that those residents that are impacted the most by low tree canopy have a voice, but also will help guide the plan itself in creating strategies for these areas to increase tree canopy. So one of the things that we tried to do when we went out into the community was to have our own internal values about how we were going to approach this. And many residents of large cities are very mistrustful of the government and of the institutions that they interact with. And so we wanted to acknowledge that. We wanted to make sure that we were talking about what they were seeing and not brushing things under the rug. We were using plain language so it was accessible to people. We were honoring the expertise of the people in the communities, and we're listening without ego. So on the next slide, you can see one of the ways that we prioritize truth telling is we created a series of self-guided presentations. This is the era of COVID, so we couldn't take these out into the community necessarily. So we had kind of like virtual open houses where we talked about the urban forest and the history of how our forest came to be so inequitably distributed across the city, and what the plan was going to be to increase equity. And now I'm going to talk about a couple of the strategies we used to get input on the plan. So we had a citywide survey. This citywide survey was written in easy to understand language. We translated it into 8 different languages, and we had a lot of open-ended questions. We assumed that some people would skip those and, get through the survey pretty quickly, and others would take some time. And we found that we had people took an average of 40 minutes to fill out our survey, and we had over 7,000 responses in all 8 of those languages. So we were extremely proud of the number of surveys that we got, and impressed with how long people took to fill them out. And we coded all of those open-ended responses into the data for the feedback. We also took the time to distribute this survey through many different non-traditional places. Can you just go back real quick, Michelle? Thank you. We distributed it through the Office of Immigrant Affairs, the Transit Rider advocacy groups. We distributed it through tenants' rights organizations, libraries, flyers, pedestrian and walking groups, and other groups that we knew had constituencies that were vulnerable to lack of tree canopy. One of the other things we did is we took those priority areas and we went to as many community meetings as we possibly could in those areas. We attended 32 community meetings. Now these are community meetings that already were happening, and we attended them. The majority of our time spent at the meetings was listening. So we presented maybe 5 slides about what we were doing to give people an understanding, but mostly we just opened it up, took extensive notes, and again coded those notes into all of the feedback. So we had 32 meetings, and we spoke to over 850 people in those meetings alone. Now, one of our most in-depth methods of getting feedback was to create a 6-week ambassador program. We had 22 people from 5 of those priority neighborhoods who went through this 6-week program. They received a stipend for their participation. And these were folks who were not already engaged in organized greening activities. So whereas our Community Voices Committee was made up of existing leaders in greening in the city, these folks were people who were not necessarily tapped into that network of people. And they went through a curriculum where they learned about urban forestry, but mostly they were learning how to talk to their community members and gather information about the topic of urban forestry so that they could be ambassadors to the plan from their neighborhoods. And these ambassadors compiled 62 different interviews with friends and family. And the key to this was that these were conversations that they recorded and gave to us that they had with their friends and family. So the types of things that they were willing to talk about were very different from what they would have talked to me about, for example. And the ambassadors were continue to be a source of advice and feedback through plan creation. A couple of these next photos are really just pictures of us out in the community. We did some walk shops where we went around and they talked to us about how they experienced trees in their neighborhood. Next slide. They also did a visual storytelling workshop with a photographer where she taught them how to tell the stories of how people interact with trees, both good and bad. You can see these amazing drummers in the park, and then you can see this sad under wires tree. And these both are ways that people are interacting with trees in their neighborhoods. And we had a final party with all of them, which was really fun. One more thing that we did to make sure that the feedback we were getting was was from those priority neighborhoods is we evaluated the success of some of these tools as they were happening. So Michelle, if you could just skip to the next slide after this. As those citywide surveys were coming in, we evaluated them to see where they were coming from, and we realized that we needed to make extra effort, which we knew we would have to, but we had extra money to make extra effort to get responses from those priority neighborhoods. So we put out 150 yard signs in parks and priority neighborhoods, made 3,000 phone calls where people spoke to residents and filled out the survey over the phone. We sent 10,000 text messages and hung 2,500 door hangers. And if you look at the next slide, you can see that 60% of responses to that survey came from the zip codes that had those priority areas in them. So we were really, really happy to see that. We had over 7,000 survey responses in 8 different languages. Again, 22 ambassadors from 5 neighborhoods who conducted 62 peer interviews. And we spoke to 850 residents at 32 community meetings. Now, this is in addition to a Instagram photo contest that we ran, those virtual open houses that I mentioned, and a series of stakeholder meetings with content experts from different fields. We had 7 of those, and each was 2 hours long. So there were another 150 people we engaged through those stakeholder meetings. So we had 7 different tools that we used. And that is the end. It's very hard not to be distracted by all of the chat. I'm so excited that there's so many questions, and I can't wait to answer them all.